Japan has just made a move that could reshape the air war over Ukraine, and it did it without firing a single shot. Quietly, almost invisibly, one of Japan's most advanced technologies has entered the battlefield inside Ukraine, where it is already threatening to turn one of Russia's most effective aerial tactics into a costly failure. As Putin continues to rely on surprise drone strikes to terrorize cities, burn infrastructure, and wear down Ukraine's defenses through sheer repetition, a new partnership has emerged that he almost certainly did not expect. And what it has produced could become one of the most dangerous answers yet to Russia's Shahid-style drone campaign. For years now, Russia has leaned heavily on long-range drone attacks as one of the cheapest and most psychologically effective tools in its arsenal. These strikes are not just military operations. They are part of a strategy built around exhaustion. Wave after wave of drones are sent into Ukrainian skies, forcing Ukraine to spend money, time, and precious interceptor capacity just to protect its people and its power grid. Russia has understood the logic of this tactic from the beginning. If the defender must spend far more to stop each attack than the attacker spends to launch it, then even limited battlefield success can create long-term strategic pressure. That is the equation Moscow has been trying to impose. But what Japan and Ukraine have now built together may have just started to flip that equation in the opposite direction. At the center of this shift is a growing partnership between Terra Drone Corporation, one of Japan's largest drone technology companies, and Amazing Drones, a Ukrainian firm based in the frontline city of Kharkiv. On the surface, they are very different companies. Terra Drone is a major Japanese enterprise, founded around a decade ago, listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, employing hundreds of people and making most of its revenue through international partnerships. Amazing Drones comes from a very different world. It was not born out of commercial expansion or corporate strategy. It was born out of war. What started as a volunteer initiative 3 years ago has developed into a full-scale company embedded within Ukraine's Brave One Defense Cluster, the national ecosystem designed to push Ukrainian defense innovation at wartime speed. That contrast is exactly what makes this partnership so powerful. One side brings industrial capacity, global capital, engineering expertise, and scale. The other brings combat urgency, frontline experience, and the ruthless clarity that only war can impose. Together, they have created something that directly addresses one of the biggest tactical and financial problems Ukraine faces every single night: how to destroy cheap incoming Russian drones without wasting expensive missile interceptors on them. The result of that cooperation is the Terra A1, an interceptor drone built specifically to hunt and destroy Shahid-type attack drones. This was not a random product idea or a peacetime experiment. It reportedly emerged from a direct meeting between Amazing Drones founder Maxim Klemenko and Terra Drone founder Toru Tokashige at a defense exhibition in 2025. What followed was the development of a drone tailored to the exact needs of Ukraine's aerial battlefield. The Terra A1 was designed for one mission above all others: to find Russian attack drones, chase them if necessary, and destroy them before they can hit their targets. And the specifications make it clear why that matters. The Terra A1 can reportedly reach speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour, or about 186 miles per hour. That immediately gives it a major edge over the Shahid-type drones Russia has been using, which are significantly slower. The Terra A1 also has a range of up to 35 kilometers, a little over 20 miles, and can reportedly carry out the full mission cycle of surveillance, target detection, target approach, and interception within a single 15-minute flight. That kind of performance means this is not a passive defense system waiting for the enemy to wander into its path. It is an active hunter. That difference is crucial. Russia's long-range attack drones are dangerous not because they are individually unstoppable, but because they are cheap, numerous, and capable of forcing Ukraine into inefficient responses. A slow, limited, or overly expensive answer to that problem is not really an answer at all. The Terra A1 appears designed precisely to avoid those weaknesses. It is fast enough to pursue a target. It is smart enough to operate with a significant degree of autonomy. And it is cheap enough to be used at scale without bankrupting the defender. Its stealth profile makes it even more dangerous. With electric propulsion, the Terra A1 reportedly produces very little noise, and virtually no significant heat signature. That makes it much harder to detect. For the Russian side, that creates a serious problem. A Shahid operator might not even know an interceptor is closing in until it is too late. In many cases, there may be no warning at all. The Terra A1 can loiter, identify a target, and move in to destroy it before the drone operator has any meaningful chance to react. In practical terms, that means a large percentage of these interceptions may occur without the sort of visible aerial chase people imagine. The Russian drone simply disappears from the mission. And then there is the most important number of all, cost. The Terra AE-1 reportedly cost just $2,000 to build. That figure is astonishing, not because it is low in some abstract sense, but because of what it means in the context of this war. Russia's Shahid-type drones have been estimated to cost around $35,000 each. Patriot interceptors can cost millions. Even relatively cheaper missile-based defenses can still cost far more than the drones they are shooting down. That imbalance has always favored the attacker. Russia could spend modestly while forcing Ukraine and its partners to pay heavily just to prevent devastation. But a $2,000 interceptor attacking a $35,000 drone changes the logic of the air war completely. This is why the Terra A1 is not just a clever technical development. It is a strategic weapon. If Ukraine can scale production and field these drones in meaningful numbers, then Russia's drone war starts becoming an expensive losing proposition rather than a sustainable pressure tactic. Every interception becomes a small financial victory for Ukraine and a small financial defeat for Moscow. Multiply that by thousands of attacks over months, and the effect becomes enormous. And Ukraine desperately needs exactly that kind of shift. Russia has been flooding Ukrainian skies with larger drone swarms than ever before. In March alone, Moscow reportedly launched 6,462 drones at Ukraine. That is a staggering number, and it reflects how deeply drone warfare has become embedded in Russia's war strategy. At the same time, Ukraine has reached a point where it is launching huge numbers of long-range drones of its own, reportedly surpassing Russia's monthly total for the first time. But meeting Russia drone for drone does not solve the defensive cost problem by itself. Ukraine still needs a way to protect cities, civilian infrastructure, energy networks, logistics nodes, and military sites from nightly aerial saturation attacks. That is where a cheap, autonomous interceptor drone becomes potentially transformative. Until now, much of the burden of anti-drone defense has fallen on systems that were never intended to serve as cost-efficient answers to mass low-cost drone attacks. The Patriot is the clearest example. It remains vital to Ukraine, especially against ballistic missile threats. On that front, it is one of the most important defensive systems Kyiv has. But against swarms of cheap attack drones, it is economically absurd. If Ukraine were forced to rely on high-end interceptor missiles for every Shahid-style threat, it would be burning through money and stockpiles at an unsustainable pace. Even for wealthy countries, that model breaks down quickly. For a country fighting a prolonged war under immense budgetary strain, it is impossible. This is what makes interceptor drones so important. They fill the gap between expensive strategic air defense and the cheap mass threat posed by attack drones. Ukraine has already been moving in this direction for months. Interceptor drones are not entirely new to the battlefield there. Ukrainian forces have already used various interceptor platforms with increasing success. In Kyiv, interceptors reportedly accounted for a large share of Shahid-type drones destroyed over the capital during one recent month. Across the country, they have become a growing part of the air defense picture. Ukrainian military leadership has highlighted how much difference they are already making. Thousands of sorties have reportedly been flown by interceptor drones, with large numbers of Russian UAVs destroyed. What this shows is that Ukraine did not stumble into the interceptor concept by accident. It has been learning in real time, under fire, and pushing hard into a new category of air defense that fits the realities of modern attritional warfare. Production of interceptor drones has reportedly surged, with internal output multiplying dramatically in a short period. More than 20 Ukrainian companies are now working in this field. This is not a side experiment anymore. It is becoming one of the core pillars of Ukraine's future defensive doctrine. The Terra A1 is the next step in that evolution, and potentially one of the most important. But this story is about more than a single drone. It is also about how Ukraine is changing geopolitically because of the war. The partnership with Terra Drone is one example of a wider transformation that may be even more significant than the technology itself. Japan has long supported Ukraine, though much of that support was initially concentrated in the humanitarian and reconstruction space. Over time, however, the relationship has deepened. Financial support, technical cooperation, reconstruction aid, and industrial involvement have all expanded. Japanese companies have begun exploring opportunities inside Ukraine. Grant agreements have been signed. New frameworks for defense technology transfer and joint production have started to take shape. The Terra A1 project sits inside that broader pattern. And that matters because this is precisely the opposite of what Putin wanted. Russia's invasion was supposed to isolate Ukraine, weaken it, strip it of agency, and ultimately erase it as a meaningful strategic actor. Instead, Ukraine has become one of the most dynamic centers of military innovation in the world. Countries that once had little reason to look to Ukraine for technological answers are now seeking partnerships with it. Nations interested in counter-drone systems, marine drones, battlefield automation, electronic warfare, and low-cost weapons innovation increasingly see Ukraine not just as a recipient of aid, but as a source of relevant expertise. Japan is a perfect example. Before this war, there was no obvious reason for a Japanese drone giant and a wartime startup in Kharkiv to be building air defense systems together. Now it makes strategic sense for both sides. Ukraine gets access to capital, scale, engineering support, and global industrial connections. Japan gets access to some of the most combat-tested drone experience on Earth. In a world where security competition is rising in multiple theaters, that experience is invaluable. Terra Drone appears to understand that clearly. Its reported $10 million investment into production is important not only because of the money itself, but because of what kind of money it is. Japanese capital is dramatically cheaper than wartime Ukrainian financing. That means the partnership is not just building a product, it is creating a more efficient production pipeline for a system Ukraine urgently needs. And because the company is already studying decentralized manufacturing methods pioneered by Ukrainian engineers, it is also learning how to produce military technology under conditions of constant threat. Traditional centralized factories are obvious targets in wartime. Ukraine has spent years adapting to that reality. Now Japanese industry is learning from it. That is why this relationship is best understood as an exchange, not just a donation. Ukraine is receiving a powerful new interceptor platform. Japan is receiving combat knowledge and industrial lessons that could prove critical for its own future defense planning. Terra Drone is even reportedly considering launching production of Ukrainian-designed drones on Japanese soil. That opens the possibility of a future in which technologies refined in the war over Ukraine become part of Japan's own defense architecture, while also feeding back into support for Ukraine itself. This is how new strategic alignments are formed, not through slogans, but through shared capability. The more one looks at this partnership, the clearer the broader pattern becomes. Ukraine is no longer just trying to survive. It is shaping the future of how many countries think about defense technology. Its battlefield has become a brutal laboratory, and the systems that succeed there carry enormous credibility. That credibility is now pulling in partners from far beyond Europe. In the Gulf, countries worried about Iranian-style drone threats have shown interest in Ukrainian capabilities. In Europe, Ukraine's possible future accession to the European Union would deepen its integration into one of the most powerful economic and political blocs on Earth. In Asia, Japan is moving closer through industrial and technological cooperation. This is not what Russian planners imagined when they launched their invasion. And the irony runs deeper still. As Ukraine's relevance grows, Russia's reputation in global arms markets has weakened. Years of war have drained Russian stockpiles, exposed weaknesses in Russian systems, and shaken confidence among buyers. Former customers are rethinking their dependencies. Some are buying less. Others are turning elsewhere. That decline matters because it undercuts one of the traditional pillars of Russian influence. Meanwhile, countries aligned with Europe and other Western-oriented defense ecosystems are expanding their reach. Ukraine's rise as an innovator is happening at the same time as Russia's aura as a military supplier erodes. That strategic contrast should alarm the Kremlin every bit as much as any single drone interception. Still, for all the geopolitical significance, the battlefield reality remains the most immediate issue. Russia's nightly drone attacks are meant to exhaust Ukraine emotionally, economically, and militarily. They are meant to create the sense that nowhere is safe, and that every night will bring another wave of fire. Any technology that can blunt that threat quickly, cheaply, and at scale becomes enormously valuable. The Terra A1 appears to do exactly that. Imagine the numbers for a moment. If Russia launches over 6,000 drones in a month, and each costs about $35,000, then Moscow is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to sustain that pressure campaign. If Ukraine had to respond to each one with missile systems costing tens or hundreds of thousands per shot, or even millions, then Russia's strategy works even when the drones fail to hit their targets. The defender still loses economically. But if Ukraine can send up $2,000 interceptors to destroy those same threats, the burden shifts. Russia spends far more to launch than Ukraine spends to defend. That is the opposite of the dynamic Moscow wants. And because the Terra A1 is autonomous and relatively simple to field compared with high-end missile systems, it could also help solve another problem: scalability. Ukraine does not just need excellent air defense. It needs enough of it. A system that is effective but too expensive or too slow to produce cannot solve a mass drone threat. A system that is cheap, quick to assemble, and suitable for decentralized wartime manufacturing is far more promising. Production is still ramping up, and current assembly rates are reportedly modest. But processes are being streamlined, investment is flowing in, and the clear goal is mass output. If that goal is reached, the Terra A1 could become a central component of Ukraine's layered air defense network. That layered concept is key. No one serious believes interceptor drones alone will solve every aerial threat. Ukraine still needs systems for ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, aircraft, and other high-end targets. But that is exactly why drones like the Terra A1 are so valuable. They free up more sophisticated and expensive defensive systems for the missions only those systems can perform. Instead of wasting major interceptors on low-cost drones, Ukraine can reserve top-tier air defense for the threats that truly require it. In effect, the Terra A1 helps rationalize the entire air defense architecture. That has implications beyond Ukraine too. The same challenge exists for other countries. The United States has encountered versions of this problem in the Middle East, where expensive interceptors have been used against much cheaper aerial threats. Even for a country with the world's largest military budget, that is not an efficient model. This is one reason why technologies like the Terra A1 may eventually attract wider attention. They represent a more sustainable answer to mass drone warfare, and mass drone warfare is not going away. If anything, Ukraine is proving that it is becoming one of the defining features of modern conflict. From that perspective, the Terra A1 is more than a Ukrainian battlefield tool. It may be an early glimpse of where air defense is heading globally. Cheap autonomous interceptors, decentralized production, rapid iteration, and close partnerships between frontline innovators and large industrial players may define the next generation of anti-drone warfare. Ukraine and Japan have simply moved faster than most in putting that vision into practice. For Putin, that should be deeply unsettling. Russia's drone strategy was supposed to create leverage. Instead, it is accelerating the development of systems designed specifically to neutralize it. Russia's invasion was supposed to weaken Ukraine internationally. Instead, it is giving Ukraine deeper ties to countries and companies that once had little direct stake in its defense. Russia was supposed to be the side imposing adaptation on its enemy. Increasingly, it is Ukraine that is adapting faster, learning faster, and building the partnerships that will matter in the long war. Every Terra A1 that takes off sends a message far larger than the drone itself. It says Ukraine is not just surviving bombardment. It is innovating under bombardment. It says Japan is no longer only a supporter at a distance, but a contributor to a new layer of Ukraine's wartime defense. It says cheap terror from the sky can be answered by something even cheaper, smarter, and more scalable. And it says that a war designed to destroy Ukraine has ended up making it more connected, more inventive, and more strategically relevant than ever before. That may be the most bitter irony of all for the Kremlin. Putin launched this war believing he could force history backward. Instead, he has helped push Ukraine forward into the center of a new defense era. Russia wanted a broken neighbor. What it may have helped create instead is a hardened, technologically creative, globally connected state that now sits at the forefront of the world's most important military transformations. And if that transformation continues, the Terra A1 may one day be remembered not just as another drone in another war, but as one of the clearest signs that Russia's method of exhausting Ukraine had started to fail. Not because the attacks stopped immediately, not because the skies suddenly became quiet, but because the economic and tactical logic behind those attacks began to collapse. Once that happens, the attacker loses more than momentum. It loses its edge. That is why Japan's quiet move matters so much. Without fanfare, without missiles, and without entering the war directly, it may have helped hand Ukraine exactly the kind of weapon it needed at exactly the right time. A small interceptor drone, built through an unlikely alliance, may now be poised to do what massive systems often cannot: make Russia's favorite cheap weapon too expensive to keep using the same way. And if that happens, then what Japan and Ukraine have built together will not just be a clever defensive tool. It will be one of the most important strategic reversals in the air war so far.